Hey all, and welcome to lighting video number 2 of the Providence Performing Arts Center Professional Development Series. Please note, we will be building on ideas that were discussed in lighting video number 1. So if you missed that or something in this video is confusing, make sure to check back on the other video to review anything you missed. In this video, we will be talking about real-world light sources, ideas and methods for translating those on stage, the different directions of light, and finally, taking a look at the initial process for planning a lighting design on a stage of any size. But before we dive in, I want to add a quick disclaimer. Please realize that there is no way I can teach a lifetime of lighting experiences for the stage in one 15-minute video. So I'm going to be giving you a basic breakdown to make your work as productive as possible. But you may need to seek additional resources or assistance initially, depending on your theater's setup. Getting an initial light plot together or a plan for how each stage light functions requires a lot of specific math knowledge, an in-depth understanding of electricity, and important safety measures involved in what could be a very dangerous situation if done incorrectly. So please consult a lighting designer or electrician or other qualified individual when working to get your initial light plot up and together. I promise it will be worth it to have a safe and functioning light plot. A lot of lighting designers that I know like to refer to their work as the icing on the cake of the production, one of the final bonus additions that helps enhance all the storytelling that so many have already done. But how do you ice a cake that hasn't been baked yet? What do you start with when you're trying to shape the lighting design for the production? For me, it always begins with the script and breaking the play or musical down to its most basic parts. After reading the script at least 3 times, and that is once for entertainment the way the audience would, then a second reading to get more comfortable with the story, the characters, and to begin brainstorming, and then finally, the third reading taking notes on logistics, specifics mentioned, and really any details that could affect the lighting. In short, script analysis. During that third read, I really try to buckle down and identify what will most likely or most realistically would be lighting each scene if it were real. This main source of light can commonly be referred to as the motivational light source or key light source. If that info isn't included in the script, you get to dream it up yourself using context clues from given circumstances. Stage directions, or the italicized text in the script, are a great way to learn more about the playwright's intentions, usually found at the top of a scene, but often sprinkled throughout the scene as well. For instance, you may encounter a stage direction like, "Flames roar in the fireplace, the only source of illumination in a windowless bedroom full of dismay." The motivational light would be coming from the fire in the fireplace on stage, or off stage for that matter. Regardless of where the set design ends up, we know that the motivational light should be coming from the fire in the fireplace. Or you might see something like, "The clouds parted over the park, letting the warm sunlight fill the air." Here, the sun would be the motivational light source in the park that's on our stage. It's also important to remember that stage directions don't always specifically come from the playwright. In many cases, scripts will include original production stage management blocking notes as well, and by extension, aren't always considered to be law. When in doubt, collaborate with your director and design team to decide as a group what they mean for your specific production. Beyond the stage directions, though, the arguably far more important place to look for lighting needs would be in the script's dialogue itself. Playwrights throughout history work in clever dialogue that informs the audience about the world of the play. For instance, one character may turn to the other and say, "It's wonderful having the beach to ourselves as the sun sets on what has been a most perfect day." We learn from the dialogue that in the scene we will be recreating a dramatic sunset, one that could evoke that specific reaction from the character. And while we may not actually use light from the sun or moon or even realistically actual fire on stage, which is a big safety no-no in many theaters, we instead work to recreate the type of light that is either directly referenced, inferred, or otherwise decided after collaborating with your team. Now, before we can talk about how we actually recreate a real-world light source on stage, let's go over some quick vocabulary options for your toolbox from which to choose. To fully understand the directions of light, I will be including 3 diagrams, each from a different view of the stage. The first is a ground plan view, which is a top view shown from the bird's eye view of the stage. The second from the front view, or what would be the audience's perspective. And the third being a section view, which would be observed by standing in the wings and looking towards center stage. The first direction of light I usually consider is the front light, or the wash of lighting that illuminates the actor when directly facing the audience. The front light system is a very beneficial angle for illuminating the actors and should be one of the first directions of light to include when thinking about both safety and visibility on stage. This particular front light is hung at roughly a 45-degree angle above the actor on stage, which we know from before that 45-degree angles illuminate figures to look more natural with limited shadows. Choosing a steeper or shallower angle for your lighting wash can often be a fun way to change its impact on the audience. A steeper angle creates dramatic shadows under the eyes and nose, but also limits visibility as it gets steeper overhead. On the other hand, a shallower angle of light would fill in the shadows on the face, but if the angle drops too far, it can make the actors appear two-dimensional on stage and can also cast large shadows on the scenery upstage of the actors, which can be very distracting. The second direction of light to consider is a backlight system, or an instrument hung directly from the rear of the actor facing the audience. A backlight system works well with the front light system to create rim light on the characters, carving figures out of what otherwise could be a flattened look on stage. When used on its own, backlight can create a very powerful silhouette, but an effect like this is recommended for shorter, powerful moments, but not necessarily during dialogue or moments when clarity of story could be affected. The backlight system here is shown at a 45-degree angle as well, creating a nice head-to-toe halo of light on the character and doesn't usually impede on the audience's view of the stage. The shallower the angle of light, though, the more chance your light will bleed into your audience and the glare could inhibit visibility for some. While a steeper angle, on the other hand, will create a more contained spill of light, but at the same time could have less visual impact on the audience. A sidelight system is the third option and a fantastic way to help carve figures out on stage, but in a different way than our backlight system. While there are many benefits of having 2 sidelight systems that oppose each other, they do not have to be symmetrical or even near the same angle. The only major disadvantage of sidelight is that, like backlight, is not great for visibility on its own. But by adding sidelight to your other systems, you double or triple your other options for combinations of diverse looks in your lighting. Top light is the next option to consider using, but can be tricky. I personally always try to push the angle of the top light either a bit to the front or a bit to the back of the actor. This is to prevent a direct top light that would point straight down on actors, uncomfortably highlighting their noses, not to mention the awkward shadow the nose creates elsewhere on the face. Shifting it forward allows the front light system to assist with visibility while offering dramatic shadows as well. A back top lighting system won't help much with visibility, but will create a more stoic silhouette than a backlight system alone. The final direction of light we'll consider is the uplight system, which refers to any lighting coming from below the actor, usually from the floor. This can be footlights, strip lights, or really any lighting instrument below the actor. Uplight is fantastic for supporting a steep front light system by filling in the details of the face. Similar to back, top, and side light, using uplight alone can be uncomfortable or odd for some audience members, but can be also very effective for this reason. Uplight creates jarring shadows opposite of what the viewer would expect to see in daily life, and can be used as a fun way to visually differentiate the villain from the protagonist. So while each direction of light has some pros and cons, one of the most important things to remember is that they are just parts of a whole, and when combined together, give us far more options for an exciting design. Picking angles is tricky, and I usually recommend testing them out in your theater space to know for sure which combinations work best for you. And while I like to say that there are no rules for lighting, there are a few guidelines when considering directions of light that I personally try to follow to avoid common pitfalls. First, I do my best to make sure there are at least 3 washes of light minimum, and each from a different side to avoid common dark spots where only 2 washes can create. On top of that, I will also work to separate two of those washes from the third across an imaginary line running from stage left to stage right. Now, this can sound complex, but in short, it would mean two washes from the front of the actor and one from behind, or vice versa. Having two front light systems creates more complex looks on the face of the character, while your backlight system does the carving for you. The other option is to have two backlight systems and one front light system. This setup creates a simpler look, offering visibility to the audience, but much more dynamic rim light options. And this is just a minimum. While it might not always be possible, more washes of light plus more directions equals more options on stage. Every little bit helps. Now that we have all these directions of light in our toolbox, we want to go through the thought process involved in choosing which to use and how. The first step for me is jumping back into the script to consider the story and what's happening in the world of the play. Let's go back to our earlier example. The clouds parted over the park, letting the warm sunlight fill the air. In this example, the motivational light source is the sun. Pretty straightforward, and there are many ways to replicate that feeling. Let's start with a simple stage. There's an audience, and for reference, let's put one character standing center stage, facing that adoring audience. Knowing the importance of visibility to lighting design, I usually make the motivational light source a front light of some kind, whether from one side or head on. To show a direct front light, simply draw an arrow in the direction the light would travel. Next, I want to note the 45-degree angle from above for that cleaner look. Being a face light system, I would plan to use incandescent light if possible, to help bring out the warm glow. So we can note on here that as well. And that being the case, if the budget permits, I want to identify the gel color that we will use for that system, which will help recreate the feeling of the sun on our stage. A gel book is an incredible resource for picking your specific gel colors because it includes a sample of the actual gel and additional information that can help inform your decision. But it also acts as an organized catalog for each company to get you the product that you want. While many companies have popped up in the last few years, two of the most common gel brands you might find available in your area that I have become super familiar with over the years are Lee and Roscoe, which are the ones I will be referencing today. And while each company has their own numbering and organization system, they all produce basically the same product in a slightly different way. Which brand you choose is up to you, but will often depend on what your theater currently has in stock or what is available in your area. I highly recommend contacting your local theater lighting supplier or even an online lighting supplier and ask about getting a gel book for whichever brands they have, as those are usually free. Once you get your gel book, start playing with it to pick out your colors. I like to use a cell phone light or similar handheld light source and shine it through the different gel filters to see what it looks like on things like the set model, fabric swatches from the costumes, and especially on human skin. One of the most important things to consider when choosing gel for face light is the level of saturation of the gel, or in reality, the percentage of white light that will make it through the color filter. Thankfully, gel books list this transparency for each color filter, but that information can be also looked up online. It's important to note that using high saturation colors for face light can be uncomfortable to view for long periods of time for some audience members and should be avoided when possible. With a warmer color of face light like amber, yellow, or orange, I try to use a gel with a transparency of at least 60%, whereas cooler colors of face light like blues and purples can often be from 50% transparency and above. For back or side light systems, feel free to amp up your gel saturation if you like, or bypass filters altogether and go with LED system for even more options and a full range of saturation and colors. Now back to our example. The clouds parted over the park, letting the warm sunlight fill the air. When I think of a warm face light gel color that represents the sun, there are a lot of options that would work. In this case, I'm going to go with Roscoe 02 or Lee 205. Nice and warm. Now, when we consider what we are recreating, we might need a bit more help from the front to fill out the brightness and fullness of the sun. Basically, since light particles travel in a straight line and aren't able to bend around objects, our current system alone would shadow the sides of the face, limiting visibility for some members of the audience the further they sit from the center of the house. To help boost visibility, I am actually going to add a second system of front light from the same angle above, but I'm going to split the two systems 45 degrees to either side as well. Then I will keep the warm gel color we picked for the first system and change the other gel color to a cooler blue like Roscoe 60 or Lee 218. Now I have two front light systems that will help fill in the details for the audience, but also make for a much more flexible design. To finish the schematic, we need our third direction of light, so I will add a backlight system to help make sure that the characters can be visually separated from the set. While it can come from any angle, to maximize light coverage and avoid dark spots, I will add the top of the triangle and put this one directly upstage and keep the 45-degree angle hung from above. Assuming we have the resources, I'm going to skip gel and label this as an LED light system with RGB color mixing, giving us versatility with the color of light during the performance. Now, if money and time permit, we can always add more lighting systems. We could split the backlight system into two like we did for the front light to create way more dynamic looks from the rear. Or we could add a top front incandescent to boost visibility and a top back LED for more effects. No matter what you add to your schematic, remember you don't have to use all the options at once. But at the same time, the more options you have, the more ways you have to keep things interesting as the story progresses. But realize that each lighting system represents an entire series of lighting instruments that will be used to cover your whole stage. So adding systems could really start to add up in instruments as well. It's important to balance the storytelling needs of the whole show with what you have available, and the schematic you create for your production will become the foundation for the light plot that you will use. I mentioned that each system or wash of light represents a larger number of actual lighting instruments that you will need, and this is because the stage is broken down into areas or zones depending on which term you prefer, and those are manageable portions of the stage. Each arrow or system of light on your schematic represents a whole series of instruments spread out over the stage to fully light the space from that direction shown. Areas range from anywhere between 6 foot in diameter on a small stage up to 16 foot or more on a Broadway-sized stage. Usually, we work to overlap the diameter of our areas by about a third, so that as the brightness falls off towards the edge of the beam, the overlap will fill any dark spots. More areas equal more control over where the audience looks, but will require an additional instrument and time for each wash as each additional area is added. Less areas could inhibit the ability to control the audience's focus, but definitely simplifies the design and speeds up the time to program. Many variables go into making these decisions depending on your space, budget, inventory, etc. And your designer can help do all the math involved to figure out what's best and what's safest for you and your theater. And that about wraps it up for this video. Let's do a quick summary of what we went over so far. Number 1, the stage is an expression of the real world, so never be afraid to look to the real world for references. Designing a sky but don't know where to start? Look to the sky, quite literally. Number 2, use the script and overall story to pull inspiration for motivational light choices. Number 3, each angle of light has its own pros and cons, but a combination of washes is most effective on stage. Number 4, try to include at least 3 washes of light, but remember each wash can represent many lights depending on your space. Number 5, make sure at least 1 wash is upstage of the actor and at least 1 wash is downstage of the actor. Number 6, call your local theater supplier or hop online and find out how to get your free gel book of options of what's available in your area. That's it for now. I look forward to seeing you in the next video where we will talk about some creative ways for designing lighting when you don't have a light board or an elaborate light plot at your disposal. A special thank you to the Walt Disney Company for supporting this professional development series through the Disney Musicals in Schools Reignite grant. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.